regulatory structure to regulate. It just has to be done fairly and impartially. I do think in this case, there could be some other improvements made in this interim with where the boundaries of the aquifer we're talking about. We have some counties out there that don't have groundwater districts at all. That might be something y'all could look at too. But these are challenging issues, but we have to take on the challenges. Thank you.
Members, any questions for this witness? Mr. Bell.
So you mentioned, thank you for being here, by the way. So two things. One, talking about perpetuity, just a sidebar question. What is the perpetuity of the human race in the absence of water if we totally depleted it?
Well, we wouldn't be able to live long enough to deplete it all because
Amen. Hey, so that's my point. So it's the gravity of it is the reason we're all sitting here today. I'm not trying to make light of it, but in the absence of looking at water in perpetuity, it leaves us with our eye not on the ball that it is the only finite resource that we have to survive with. Best I know. But anyway, as far as those assets go, and I'll leave it at that. But thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Stelly, please state your name, who you represent, and your position on the bill, and you may proceed with testimony.
Amber Stelly. I'm the General Manager for Consolidated Water Supply Corporation. Excuse me. And I'm for this bill. And what else am I supposed to say? I'm sorry. I have a cold. I apologize. It hurts you more than it hurts me. I'll do my best. So I'd like to speak a little bit about this bill, and I'd like to thank you for allowing me to speak on it. Some of this I know you all have already heard, but I'd like to talk about the scale and scope of the proposed withdrawals. I agree that there's much that we don't know about this project and about hydrology in the area, but if we consider simply the scope of withdrawal, the permitted and the part of the project that is not within the permitted scope, but I think obviously very relevant. We're looking at a combined withdrawal of over 60,000 acre feet per year from an aquifer that hasn't seen that withdrawal. And so I think that uncertainty, it's not invalid to say we should be concerned, and we haven't seen it. So I've heard a lot from our stakeholders, excuse me, even since the last hearing, that we're shocked to hear that those numbers top. That 61,000 acre feet per year tops the usage of 10 East Texas counties. So again, I think that's a reason to be concerned. Additionally, what I think like about this bill is we do need to add some understanding of the hydrology in our area. Houston County, which is where most of Consolidated's wells are at, all of our wells are at, but most of our members and our customers are in Houston County. We actually import water into the district currently from those wells. We use a fraction of what this request is to serve over 16,000 people. So we do expect that based on state water plans currently on the books that are referenced in this application, looking at what science has been done in the area, we are projected to have deficits. The local impacts, I think, should be studied. The economic, of course, needs of the area that this water is intended for are very important, and we're all concerned about those parts of Texas that are cited in this application, C, G, H, K, L. Those are all very important regions, and their economic growth matters to us as well. However, the local impacts to Region I must be considered. I'd like to say that we are that white area that Mr. Harden next to me referenced that does not have a GCD. I would like to thank those of you who are trying to help us get one off the ground. I think it's very critical that HB 27 passes, especially since we do not have the understanding. We don't know how many private wells are out there. According to the Texas Water Development Board, we have over 1,800 wells in just Anderson and Houston County. Most of those are domestic. Most of those are agricultural and domestic, not public supply. And those are just wells that have been drilled since 2003. We really don't know the total. So those 1,800 wells and those individuals who are using those, they're probably not consolidated members. So I'm asking us to consider those impacts to those individuals who may be faced with a public health crisis on a large scale if we don't protect them. I don't want them to be my customer if they don't want to be my customer. So I thank you for trying to understand and really collect a little bit more science on this area that we know very little about, even though I am the biggest water supplier in the area. I will admit to you, we don't have a lot of science in that area. Again, I would just close one last thing. The Texas Groundwater Summit is going on this week. The only real new bit of information I have to share with those of you in this room who've already heard me talk is retired Chief Justice Hetch said during his keynote speech this week, the rule of capture has outlived its usefulness. Texas is the only state that has it. And of course, he famously gave a concurring opinion on the Cipriano case that we are all very familiar with. And he mentioned that if that was happening today, he'd be on the other side of it. And so we've learned a lot even since then, and I agree that we still have quite a bit to learn. But I think that that's very relevant to know that we have some work to do statewide as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Representative Ashby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Amber, thank you for being here. It's good to see you again. I think a couple of things that you cited in your comments jumped out to me. One is we across the aquifer here, we really don't have a lot of hydrological data. And so to the extent that HB 27 speaks to that and addresses that by having a study conducted by the Water Development Board, obviously it's timely in the sense of looking at some pending applications, but a little bit more macro, it's high time that we finally get some real data and some science behind looking at what actually is available in terms of the MAG and which of course, you know, working with the GCD on desired future conditions. But you also referenced the application that would create a deficit in terms of water availability. Can you speak to that a little bit more?
Sorry, the 2021 state water plan cites that Region I, which is where the Red Town project is located, Region I is scheduled to have over a 205,000 acre-foot deficit by 2070. It's scheduled to have over 182,000 acre-feet per year deficit by 2030. So this is according to the state water plan that's cited in the applicant's hydrology report. Excuse me.
And that deficit is those numbers are before.
Those are before this application, yes, sir.
Exactly. Well, I think that's an important point for members in the public to understand is we don't currently have enough water to address ongoing issues, much less looking at the 61,000 acre-feet application that's pending. I guess, you know, lastly, you know, you obviously Houston County does not have a groundwater conservation district, so that's an issue that is being looked at and hopefully going to be addressed in the near term. But I'm just curious, when you look at the bill, do you feel like that it's got everything in there, that all the tools that we need in Houston County to at least temporarily put a pause on this project that's being proposed and looking at the science and data that we desperately need?
I believe it's quite possible. In fact, if I were the applicant, I would consider, well, if you're going to put a moratorium on me in this district, I'll push more of my well drilling in Houston County, which is completely vulnerable and lacks a permit process. I don't know what if that is actually a plan or not. I know the current project cites 11 wells in Houston County. But it doesn't appear that this project would directly that this bill would necessarily stop that, but it would give us some science and some understanding. If you wanted to add to that bill also enabling legislation for Houston County GCD, I think that would be the only way to help us kickstart that project and help the local stakeholders also collect data. Obviously, the creation of a GCD is no easy task. I know that there's going to be quite a bit of groundwork and probably a year or two of administrative legwork just to get this off the ground, and a big part of that is really understanding our existing users. the sooner we do that, I think the better, so that we can protect them from these large projects.
Right. Like, just my last question, and it may end up being just a comment, but I see we've got Representative Alders over here, representative from Smith County. I was just talking with, of course, our great Senator, Senator Nichols, that represents a lot of this area. But I was just talking before we started this hearing with someone in the audience, and they were looking at the Carrizo-Wilcox Aquifer as well as the Queen City, and he has a place in Bastrop County, which obviously is just east of Austin here, and didn't realize that this project, the aquifer, just the magnitude of how big it is. And so you cited, I think, at least 5 different regions that could potentially be impacted, and it could have been more. I just remember I was trying to count them. I know you said at least 5. And so I think, this was brought out at our earlier hearing, but this is not an isolated situation to just Representative Harris and Representative Ashby's district. I mean, it could affect counties up and down the entire aquifer from northeast Texas, obviously through central Texas, and sweeping back towards the southeast. So this is a statewide issue that we're looking at here, and I appreciate you bringing that up in your comments. And again, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Members, any other questions? Ms. Daly, thank you for being here very much. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, good afternoon, Chairman Harris, Vice Chair Martinez, and distinguished members of the committee and guests. For the record, my name is Kevin Ward. I serve as the General Manager for the Trinity River Authority, and I'm here in that capacity today. And I'm here also I am for House Bill 27, and I'm glad you've given me the opportunity to provide you a little insight on it. I agree, we need more science. I mean, there's just little doubt. I came before the committee back on the 15th of July, and I at that time was pretty rushed because we had just dug into this to try to figure out what was going on, since we had heard there was a rather large project that was going to be approved. And as we did, and we went through and followed the process that had gone on to create a DFC for this area, for the GMA, we determined that there was some information in there that was hydrogeologic that we didn't anticipate. We did not anticipate that a major portion of the budget, 72% of the budget for the water, would come from the alluvium. And alluvium is basically the upper level of formations of where water starts to gather, and when it becomes groundwater. Actually, once the water falls on top of that around the river, it seeps into the ground, and at some point it may become groundwater. At some point it may still be surface water. It just depends. It is mysterious and occult, as the court case said back in the early 1900s. And there's been a lot of law passed on it since. You did cite the constitutional amendment from 1917, and I would, at least for the benefit of everyone here, recite part of it only because it does clarify one issue that will become something that has to be looked at as we go forward, and that is the conservation and development of all natural resources of this state, including the control, storing, preservation, and distribution of its storm and flood waters, the waters of its rivers and streams for the irrigation, power, and other purposes. They're all a part of the charge to the legislature and to this body. So from that, you created groundwater districts. It is notable that this was in 1917, and that when they finally created groundwater districts, it was 1949. That meant that a lot of legislative bodies considered it and worked on it for a while, because the High Plains was the breadbasket. It was producing a lot of water, and all of those wells up there in the Ogallala needed to produce so that they could develop the agriculture for the state of Texas, and they still do. And so it's not an easy issue, what you have before you. This is something that does require time. Our board is convinced that it also requires additional science, so they have asked us my staff, to go ahead and commission a study of our own so that we can look at this. When I came before you last time, I threw some numbers out, and I'm going to repeat them today because I think they're still very pertinent. Regardless, that there will be experts that will tell you we really don't know, and I agree with that. We probably really don't know. The science that we had when we put together this desired future condition for this particular GMA stated that under baseline conditions, there's about 45,624 acre-foot of water. Now, I love those numbers. When I was at the water board, I used to argue with staff, why did you put a 4 in there? You know, it's like, do you really know that at that level? Well, that's what the math came out to be under significant digits, et cetera. But the bottom line, about 45,000 acre-feet of water that is being contributed during normal rainy times into 3 rivers that transect the recharge zone of the aquifer. Now, during dry periods, that's going to reverse. But what the budget said in here for this particular aquifer system, and we're talking the entire GMA, is that if the desired future condition was deployed, then you would have a managed available groundwater amount that would be increased by 255,000 acre-feet, and most of that, 72% of that, would be coming from the alluvium. Some of it would be an enhancement of recharge that was due to a reduction in the evaporation, a significant portion, as a matter of fact.
Will you repeat that just real quick, that figure that you just stated?
So 255,000 acre-feet of water. Currently, you've got about 130,000 acre-feet of water, and the budget for 2014 to 2080, on the average per year of acre-feet, will go up to 385,000 acre-feet. I think I told you last time, that's not a result of what's in the water plan and what's needed for the region or any planned projects. It's just the number that was put into the DFC. It was a result of taking a look at all of the property and the landowners and leases and things like that, and making an assumption that some people would develop their water and maybe even put them into these groups that would sell water. And if they chose to do so, the landowners could do so. So they wanted to make sure they had a water budget that could accommodate that. So they did. That came up to the 255,000 acre-feet. What that would require, though, would be for that 45,000 acre-foot going into the 3 rivers, according to this model, that would go away. It would reverse. It would go to 0. And then there would be an additional 138,000 acre-feet that would actually come out of the alluvium. So when you go to their next page that goes to the budget sources and uses, the total amount coming from the alluvium was 184,000 acre-feet. That's more than the 130,000 currently being pumped by wells, or at least estimated by the Water Development Board. So they're interesting figures to us. We got really, we got zeroed in on them pretty fast, as you can imagine. And so we really think what science needs to occur so that we can find out how much of this may be coming from the river itself, because we don't know. It could be, because keep in mind, we've got 3 rivers. So the additional science should be to take and allocate that, take a look at those amounts. How much is coming from the Trinity in these counties? How much does that affect my water rights? Because we currently have water rights from 2 sources for the Trinity River Authority that are permitted by the state of Texas. One is in the river itself, which we capture and conserve in Lake Livingston. 70% of the water in there is for Houston, and 30% of it is basically allocated to us in water rights. That's 1.2 million acre-feet of water that serves some of the most important industries in the state of Texas, if not the world, definitely the country, petrochemical industry and all. So anytime we see a potential for downturn in that, we'd be very interested in it. So if it's 20,000 acre-feet, 30,000 acre-feet, it's still a number. We don't know what it is. So we want to find out what that is. We also find that we have reuse water that there was a land rush on reuse water in the early part of this century. And so all of the entities that had the potential to use their reuse water and reuse the water, they went down to get permits almost all at the same time from the state of Texas. Hopefully we won't have that kind of rush on this kind of groundwater. We'll see. But when they did, they divided it all up. We were benefited by 3 plants in the Metroplex that are rather large, to where we have a total discharge amount permitted to us of 245,000 acre-feet. And of that, we have to put 30% of it back in the river and send it downstream to benefit Houston and downstream users. So at least 70,000 acre-feet goes downstream. That crosses over this aquifer recharge area. So potentially, if really there is a pull in the recharge zone on the Trinity of water, it could be pulling some reuse water also that belongs to us. So we have a vested interest in that. That's why we're here. we'll be glad to provide whatever resource we can. We do have technical experts. I've got, people on staff that have looked at this in addition to myself. I have a background in it from serving on the Water Development Board, or at the Water Development Board as their executive administrator. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Great testimony. Theoretically, if I understand what you're saying, the water coming down the Trinity River, which surface water, I'm assuming most of those water rights are allocated to Tarrant County Regional Water Supply, or some sort of regional water supply through TCEQ. They've got that water right. That water passes through the recharge zone of the aquifer. That water, which is theoretically owned by some other entity, goes into the aquifer. Somebody has 47 wells, or however many wells along the river, maybe in that aquifer recharge zone. They're pulling the water out that is owned by that entity and reselling it to that same entity. Theoretically, that could be possible.
By law, yes. It would transfer ownership once it percolated into the ground.
Right.
I failed to note one thing in the, that I caught when I was reviewing this again. And it's on page 22 of that report that gives a summary of increased pumping. It calls the inflow, uniquely calls it induced inflow. I thought that was rather interesting, induced inflow. Not sure if that makes a difference in state law or not with regard to recharge and all that, and percolation into the ground, but it calls it induced, so. And again, I'm not a hydrogeologist, I'm not a geoscientist, so I'm just reading and repeating what I see in the report to you.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Representative Berry.
Yeah, I think we kind of touched on this last meeting about recharge zones. Wouldn't that be something very similar that we discussed in the last meeting? I guess my question is a little bit more broad. We have a bill here that we're talking about, House Bill 27, that's going to put a moratorium for a certain period of time so that we can study, the aquifer and the situation of the aquifer, how it recharges, what it looks like, and the volumetric flows that it could produce, right? So I guess my question is this. For a year, we're going to have a moratorium on new permits. How many businesses, or it's not going to affect residential wells, right? It's
That's
only going to be commercial wells over 25,000?
It's actually only going to be production and export permits.
Production and export permits, okay. So production permits, would that be a permit associated with
Production
potentially?
and export together.
Okay, okay. Production for the use of export.
Yep.
I got you. Okay, all right.
Which none exist inside the GCD right now.
None?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Representative Romero.
Thank you. Just a question to your comments that you were mentioning earlier. You mentioned that ownership of water while it's in a river. Is that the case, where is that not considered surface water, or is until it ends up in Lake Livingston? Are you saying there's ownership while it's moving down the river?
Right, we would have ownership of that and be able to capture it into Lake Livingston, so a certain amount of water we'd have a priority over in the river for that to get there. Now, definitely capturing it in Lake Livingston is essential for us to have the water.
Yeah,
That's true.
understood. But all along the entire body of river, are you telling me that along the way, when it reaches, mile mark or so, it becomes somebody else's water, or is it Texas's water?
It's always Texas's water.
But are we talking about private ownership, or are we talking about the state's ownership?
Public ownership. And
okay.
then, the water rights themselves that the state is able to permit to you become a right, a vested right, even to someone like Dow Chemical. And they're based on the priority date that they were established, and also based upon the permit itself. The permit may have some reservations in it that allow other people to be superior to it, even if it's a different date, only because of when it was constructed and because of agreements that were wrought whenever the water rights were issued. So in our case for Lake Livingston, we're subordinate to new reservoirs that'll be built on the tributaries of the Trinity River if they're built. That was included in our permit.
Upstream from.
Upstream from us, that's right. We would be we'd be able to go to the hearings and talk about it, but we are subordinate to those.
When you mentioned the 3 plants in the Metroplex that send water down to you, which plants are you talking about?
The Central Regional Wastewater Treatment Plant, the 10 Mile Creek wastewater treatment plant, and the Red Oak Creek treatment plant.
The bill proposes a time period for, a moratorium, but it sounds like in terms of studying this, it sounds like there's a lot that we're going to study. Have you, because it seems like you've really worked on this, so specifically, do you see a time frame that this study normally would take place?
We're going
And
to
is there a defined scope of study that you're proposing?
We will work with, once we select someone that we believe is qualified to do the study, we will engage them on the scope in detail. Currently, our scope is to look at these reports and to look at the data that we have to determine if we can calculate how much of surface water would be reduced by this.
So even though we're taking action on this bill now, you haven't fully created the scope of what the study would be?
That's for Trinity River Authority's study, not the study that's being proposed by this bill.
Okay, so in terms of a proposal for what the study would entail in this, who should it be created by? How long would it take to create the scope of the study? Because if we're talking about a specific time certain that there's a moratorium, we could also have a little bit of debate about what should actually be included in the study. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree, and I would think that perhaps the Water Board, since they would be likely to be conducting this study, would need to work with stakeholders and work with public officials to make sure that the answers that they're going to try to get will meet the needs for the discussion that needs to occur.
One of the things that you brought up was the proposal that somebody may have export permits, they may produce their own water, they may move it. You said, I think your number was 385,000 acre foot, and that was at a time in the past. Do we know that those things actually happened? Was that an overcalculation, or was that accurate?
I don't know exactly how that process occurred. I wasn't at the table. All I know is that in the report itself, they make mention of the 4-star holdings, and that was considered in calculating the amount of pumping that would occur. So they were trying to preserve the water rights for those individual landowners that have water rights in all of that, the old 4-star group, which is no longer the same. I mean, it's been sold, some of it's been sold off. So they it looks like what they did is said, well, there may be folks that are going to decide they want to pump, export, sell their water, develop it, however, and there may be some that don't, but this number is a good number for us to start with, which is this much additional pumping. We'll add that to the water plan numbers. I'm guessing they put in the organic numbers for the folks that have land out there that are just going to be develop ranchettes and, do their own development of water for their ranch or whatever. They probably plugged all that in and then came up with the number.
But
That's
there's no
what
way
we
to
would have done.
audit whether or not that was an overcalculation or an undercalculation, because there's no way to really monitor how.
There's nothing in law that requires them to or requires them not to include numbers that in order to develop this desired future condition.
So if there's an overcalculation of approximate export use or development of private water rights, then you could argue that number alone could lead us to believe that there's less water there than there actually is. Meaning the water.
Less water?
Let's say, for example, this 385,000 is based
Yes.
upon an estimate of how many people would actually export their water or develop their water.
Yes.
If that was off by 50%, that's a big number. And you mentioned earlier 20,000 acre foot, but if they're off by 50% here, now we're talking about 200,000.
That's correct.
That's a lot bigger number. It's 10
That's-
times the number.
That's correct.
So this is what I mean, like, there can be debate about what should be included in the study, and if we're making a proposed study based upon an estimate of folks that may develop,
Right.
I just think it's kind of, the math can be way off.
I imagine that a lot of folks would agree with that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Members, any other questions? All right, thank you. Vanessa?
Thank you, Chairman Harris, members. My name is Vanessa Puig-Williams. I work for Environmental Defense Fund, where I lead our water program here in Texas, and I'm here today testifying in support of House Bill 27. I don't normally testify on local bills, but as we've heard mentioned today, this issue in your district in East Texas is really calling to attention what are statewide issues. And so since my work is primarily involved in advocating for more sustainable groundwater policy statewide, I felt compelled to come here and offer my support for the bill and just mention that the study that you're proposing in House Bill 27 is something that is needed across the state to really understand what can be produced from aquifers in perpetuity. And actually, this committee, for several sessions, has passed out legislation that would have required the Water Development Board to provide groundwater districts essentially that number, that we referred to it as the maximum sustained pumping volume in that legislation. So I feel like moving into interim discussions and this next regular session, that is an issue that we should look at again, because I think there are groundwater districts and communities that would really benefit from that knowledge. Right now, districts are really only provided what is called the total estimated recoverable storage volume, TERS. And that, I think, results in analysis that just tilts the balance to overproduction, because that volume of water is just really how much water is in the aquifer, not how much water actually makes economic sense to pump from the aquifer or what is sustainable. And then I'll just remind everyone that the modeled available groundwater numbers that are derived from the desired future condition process aren't necessarily sustainable either. So when we're looking at what's sustainable, it might be a very small amount of water that can be produced from the aquifer. It may not be enough for what communities across the state need, and that's where I think the hard decisions are going to have to be made. And it gets even more complicated when we're talking about groundwater surface water interaction. When water changes ownership hands as it moves from surface water to groundwater, we need to know, we can't manage what we don't measure. We need to know how much groundwater pumping affects surface water flows. But then the question is, what do we do with that information when we know it? And I think that's going to be the tricky thing for all stakeholders and for this body to figure out moving forward. I think we need, obviously stronger regulations, but we also need to be looking at voluntary type conservation transactions. Representative Bell, I've heard you mention several times about the right that landowners have to be able to conserve their groundwater in place. To do that, we need to know how much is there, and we need to be able to create a regulatory framework that actually enables those kinds of transactions to be protected, and we don't have that right now. So I just wanted to, again, thank you, Chairman Harris, for your leadership and for creating an opportunity to have these conversations that we've been needing to have as a state and a community for a long time.
Thank you. Vanessa, they're called groundwater conservation districts. Would you agree that their entire purpose is to conserve groundwater?
Yes, I think that is a key purpose of a groundwater conservation district, is to conserve groundwater.
Do you think that they have the tools necessary as given by this legislature to do that job effectively?
My answer would be no. I do think they have authorities to do a lot more than some districts are doing. The problem is that they don't always have clear mandates to do that. So I think what we could be looking at across the board at Chapter 36 is, where does it make sense to actually direct districts to do certain things? And that way, when they are making decisions, they actually have sort of the regulatory protection to make those hard decisions that they need to.
So you think the data that could come from the study being mandated in this bill could give us the basis that we need for this legislature to move forward in knowing how to effectively give directives to groundwater conservation districts?
Yes, I think this study, I think other studies across the state will really help with both local decision-making and also decisions that this legislature is going to make with respect to how we amend Chapter 36 to provide them with more tools.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Representative Bell.
Just one quick question. GDCs, when you look at what you can regulate, or I guess a question to you. They regulate to desired future condition.
Mm-hmm.
And we hear a lot about the MAG, but, and maybe it's a better question for the chairman. Should the study include the desired future condition, since that's what the Groundwater Conservation District is required to meet versus the MAG, which is more of a global number?
Yeah, I think that would make sense to require the board to do a study that looks at how much water could be produced in perpetuity and achieve the desired future condition, because that's ultimately what the statute says districts have to manage groundwater to achieve. So I think that would make more sense.
I just was curious, because it again, maybe a better question, but just ran through my mind, but anyway. But thank you for your answer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Members, any other questions for this witness? All right, thank you all very much for coming to testify today. Chair calls Dan Gaddis. Mr. Gaddis, please state your name, who you represent, your position on the bill, and then you may proceed with testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chair, members. Good afternoon, Chairman Harris, members of the committee. Thank you for the invitation and opportunity to speak to you today on this important issue. My name is Dan Gaddis, and I serve as Second Vice President of the Texas and Southwestern Cattle Raisers Association, or TSCRA as it's affectionately known by most. I'm a lifelong rancher, landowner in Williamson County, and probably the most notorious past is that I actually served in this body at one point in time and on this committee. TSRA is a 148-year-old trade association and the state's oldest and largest livestock association. We represent approximately 28,000 individuals and businesses as members that contribute to the production of beef and the stewardship, as well as represent those same landowners that own predominantly the bulk of Texas. I want to start by saying that TSCRA does not have an official position on these bills yet. Since the discussion that took place in the committee last month, TSCRA has been reviewing our current groundwater and property rights policies. And while we remain neutral in this legislation at this time, we recognize the importance of the issues addressed by these bills. Water management in Texas is critical, not just for urban growth, but also for agricultural communities that feed and sustain not only our state, but our world. The state of Texas has done a commendable job under the rule of capture in managing and protecting groundwater so far. But as our state grows, we must confront new challenges, ensuring that water resources are managed responsibly is vital for both our cities and our rural communities. It is clear that the time for thoughtful, forward-looking action is now. We particularly want to recognize Chairman Harris and the members of this committee for taking on this complex and long-standing issue. Water policy is not easy. I'll go off script in what they've written. It's not a bill for apple pie and mom, which we in the legislature always love to vote for. Those are great bills. This ain't it. This is hard. Water policy is not easy and has been a topic that many have been unwilling to tackle. Your efforts to address these challenges are greatly appreciated. We must exercise caution as any forthcoming changes to existing water law should respect the long-standing principle that groundwater ownership is a private property right vested in the landowner. At the same time, we must ensure that groundwater resources in rural Texas are not inadvertently depleted, as they are vital to agriculture, ranching, the survival of rural communities. Redirecting water to urban areas without regard for these needs would leave our communities and the areas without regard for these needs. Agriculture remains the cornerstone of rural Texas, and food security is inseparable from national security, as we well know. Protecting our ability to produce food, maintain ranching operations, and sustain local economies depends on safeguarding access to water. We look forward to working closely with Chairman Harris, this committee, and all stakeholders as the bills and others move forward. We recognize that this is a complex issue with no simple solutions, but we believe that through collaborative and thoughtful discussion, we can develop policies that meet the needs of both urban and rural Texans now and for future generations. I will stress to you, and it's not unknown to each and every member of this committee, this is probably one of the hardest issues that you will deal with in a legislature or that any legislature has dealt with. There are competing interests, huge competing interests. We in TSCRA stand with the landowners of Texas and say, don't forget who owns the water. It is the landowner. While there are competing interests in that, we have to understand and manage that water resource for future generations. When all of these issues came to pass, Jason Skaggs, our executive director, who's had been a dear friend back when I was in the legislature here, I sent him a bill that I'd filed in the 79th legislature that never got a hearing, talking about out-of-district transfers. I had the unenviable position of representing both a water-rich county and a water-needy county, Milam County and Williamson County. And so really had to try to figure out how to balance those two issues of where our water was needed and where our water was. That is not an easy issue to deal with. What I would stress and what I came up with, and I'm not the brightest person in this room by any stretch of imagination, but what I came up with was this. If we have water resources that can truly be utilized without harming our future, we should do so and be able to have communities that are growing today be able to utilize those. But we cannot create economic deserts in our rural communities and their inability ever to be able to obtain that water back someday should they desire to grow and create businesses and families and other opportunities. That truly is the struggle that you will face. I commend you on this bill more than anything on one thing, and that is science and real data is the way that we will solve this problem. We have to know. A great quote was made, and that we utilize in the cattle industry all day long. You cannot manage what you do not measure. If you don't know what the numbers are, you can't manage it. So I commend the chairman and this committee for being thoughtful with trying to make sure that we have sound science involved. With that, I'll answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Gaddis. Members, any questions? Representative Romero.
Thank you for your testimony, and thank you for your service to our state as well. A comment was made earlier that former Chief Justice Heck said the rule of capture has outlived its usefulness. As some of the statements that you just made, it's the landowners. How would you respond to the former justice?
I would respond as many landowners have said, and I think if you go back to Dolph Briscoe, Governor Briscoe made a comment at one point in time. He says, I was all for the rule of capture until I understood what the rule of capture meant. And we're all for the rule of capture as the landowner, saying I can capture the water under my ground and utilize it for a good purpose and be able to utilize that. But am I for the rule of capture when my neighbor grabs it all and I can't use any? That's where the rub comes. And so I understand his comment, but the rule of capture has basically been the rule we've had in place to recognize that the landowner owns the water. What I would stress to you is don't forget that concept as we move forward in a largely growing state, left and right, as we understand. Don't forget who owns the water. There may be better ways and smarter ways, I don't know what they are today, to manage that resource and to recognize the ownership of it appropriately as the landowner's resource. But the rule of capture is what we've utilized so far.
Should, knowing that some people could abuse the rule of capture, should there have been long ago a limit to how much can be pulled based upon some calculation on either acreage or acreage plus, and this goes back to the chairman's bill, why it's so important that we have science and understanding what's under that, and then going back to a statewide plan where we actually have assessed it. I think the gentlelady that was just here on the end described it. We should have done this long ago for the entire state.
Representative, I don't disagree that we should have done some things and maybe different in hindsight. There have been some very diligent, smart men and women serving on this committee as chairman and had created the bills that currently are law in the state of Texas, and they did the best they could do at the time that they could do with the science that they had and with the ability to be able to manage and get the bills passed. As y'all well know, that's probably, you've got to be able to convince other members that come from urban and come from rural and come from suburban areas. You've got to be able to manage all of those different things. They've done a pretty good job so far with what they could do. We have better science today. We have better ability to do good science today than we had in the past. We do. I mean, that's just part of technology's advancement. What I would tell you is that what they've come up with was the best political solution we had at the time. There are challenges to it, huge challenges to it. One of being is that we typically draw management districts on political lines, not aquifer lines. And so what we've always known, and this is not anything that somebody doesn't know, is that if you have multiple districts that are managing the same resources, the one with the most liberal district rules, that's who wins. And so who do you really have managing the district? But that is a political issue that each and every one of you are going to face and have to address, because local control is important, and what does that really mean with regard to an aquifer and how that's controlled and how that's managed. Me as a landowner, I want it as close to me as possible, because I want it managed so that my children's and my grandchildren, we're 7th generation East Williamson County. I want my great-grandchildren to still have that resource and to be able to have the life that we have today and produce food and produce fiber and produce great things for the world.
Well, thank you for your testimony and in helping to understand the balance of how important it is to, and I really like the term that you put as creating economic deserts in an area that's going to grow, that potentially grow in the future. Thank you.
Yeah.
Members, any other questions for this witness? Representative Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, you talk about the conundrum. It is a conundrum. If you go to Montgomery County, if you go to Freestone County where I ranch, you got one set of concerns. If you go to Montgomery County where I live, you got a whole other set of concerns for that region that aquifer would set in, where you've got a really large economic powerhouse that could dictate everything to everyone above it. So I think you're right. We've got a lot of weighty decisions ahead of us, and not severing the water rights from the land is one of the things that I think we've got to be really cautious of. Would you agree with that?
Yes,
Thank you.
Representative Bell. I mean, first and foremost, I'm here based, as Second Vice President TSRA to say, don't throw us out. I mean, rural Texans and our members are the ones that constantly get dealt the blow when we're talking about future development in Texas. If it's not new roads or railways across us or pipelines across us or power lines across us, it's looking at, oh, well, there's water underneath you. Let me see how I can get it. We're constantly being dealt with that issue each and every day, and have for a long time. I just beg you not to forget the landowner and the ownership of that water resource, where it lies when you start looking at all these issues. And they are competing issues, which is why you have, the current bills that you have today. But I would tell you, they tell my children this all the time. You can't do hard things if you don't do hard things. You're gonna have to make some hard choices and decisions in here in order to peel back that onion and get to the ultimate deal of being able to manage this resource appropriately for everyone.
And I think, to put it in a cattleman's metaphor, I think what we feel like over in Freestone County, Anderson County, around there, is that because our bottom wire is 12 inches off the ground, somebody's sneaking under it and grabbing our calves and claiming rule of capture. So
That's how you feel. That's how we feel on the water a little bit.
that's it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? All right, Mr.
Chairman.
Gaddis, thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you
Appreciate
very
it.
much.
Members, we've got a couple of resource witnesses. Chair calls Natalie Ballou and Kim Nygren. And Dr. Kathy Alexander. Ms. Nygren and Dr. Alexander from TCEQ, and Ms. Ballou is with the Texas Water Development Board. Ms. Ballou, you're the only one that registered to testify, so if you would, please state your name, who you represent, and your position on the bill.
Hi, Chairman Harris, Vice Chair Martinez, members of the committee, and guests. Good to see you all again. I'm Natalie Blue with the Water Development Board, and I am just here as a resource, so if y'all have any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Thank you, members. Any questions for the resource witnesses? Representative Villalobos.
So one of the previous witnesses talked about the maximum sustained pumping volume. Is that something your organization has looked at before, or what are your thoughts about that?
Yes, essentially that exercise would be done with one of our groundwater availability models, and we have done that in the past, back in 2011, at the request of our board members as towards the beginning of the desired future condition process resulting in MAG. So it's definitely something that is doable with our groundwater models.
When y'all did that in 2011, was it a statewide or was it for certain aquifers?
We did it for all the aquifers in the state and the GMAs.
But I guess that number from 2011 is the basis for what we see today when we talk about MAG and.
No, it was kind of just an informational number for our board members to be aware of. And we have had some model updates since then and new data and information that goes into that model. So the number would likely be different than what it was calculated in 2011.
Were you around that time? Did it seem extremely beneficial to the board? Why have they not asked to, an updated study?
I was not around then.
Sorry. I was also in high school, so.
Yeah, just graduated college, but my understanding is that it's a helpful number just because it was a new process back then to our board members and they just kind of wanted to understand it. But that's kind of all I know about it. I'm sorry.
Okay. Those are all my questions right now. Thanks.
Members, Representative Romero.
Natalie, I asked the previous witness a question in terms of like developing the scope. In reading the bill, do you see a time frame by which the scope would be developed? And when should we be able to see and understand what the scope of the study would include?
So I have not seen the substitute version, but looking at the introduced version, the scope is fairly laid out well, and like that's the scope to me. And to me, that scope is slightly different than a scope that you might develop for a groundwater surface water interaction study. I believe you might have been asking Mr. Ward this question. And we do have some ideas for a scope on more data collection that would then feed into a future groundwater model update. But to me, these are two separate exercises.
And understanding what's available, I mean, I'm going to the finish line and going, okay, what does the finish line actually look like? When do we determine, yes, this is a super prolific, aquifer that can have enough water for X number of citizens, and people in other parts of, let's say where I'm from in DFW, can actually maybe consider this, or no, we should not, because then you would create a real conflict and actually a harm, if we want to use that word, to the region where these aquifers are and all the residents around. In order to get there, when I hear something like we're planning for future use or other people, future development and or export, how do you come up with that number? Is it an estimate? And my concern was that's an estimate of who could, maybe they never did, and that number could really be inflated.
Right. For the, future pumping that the groundwater management areas put into their model runs, they will typically use what is in our state water plan for future groundwater projects, so that everything that's captured in the state water plan is included in their planning, essentially. So any export projects that were flagged in the state water planning process by the regional water planning groups, that would be determined by the regional water planning groups. So it's kind of a self-reported, difficult to check and verify, I would say, on my end. But that's how that future project would be incorporated into a MAG run.
And how long does that projection go forward? How many years are you looking forward?
Those are 50-year timelines.
50 year. So how do you plan 50 years in advance if you have someone that's coming in and saying they want to put in an export opportunity, if you will, like this? You certainly cannot see something like this coming.
Well, that's why the planning cycles are 5 years. They happen every 5 years. So every 5 years, the districts redo their joint groundwater planning, but also the regional water planning groups are doing their planning in 5-year cycles.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? Representative Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, you and I haven't talked specifically about this, but I've been talking, well, since during session about the need to have a dynamic 3D ability to see what's going on in our aquifer. And my understanding is Water Development Board with its data model can kind of do something like that, but it's not nearly as, it's not like some of the things we envision when we look at what you can do with technology, even what oil field and some of the rest of them do in defining what stratas look like, what rates of flow look like, all those other things. If you had if the Water Development Board had the resources to put a water purveyor facing resource for them to put all of their water data, what's your pump models, what does that all look like, what do your well drillers look like, and you built that in. I would like to know more from the Water Development Board regarding what it would take to create a truly dynamic model that was constantly moving forward. Now, I've been told that maybe I don't want to know that because, it might create some stressing. But I will tell you that as an agile, adaptive state, we can address the things we know readily. Where we run into problems is when we wait until we're at a point of catastrophe and then we're reacting to that. So I would ask for you to look at and consider and help me understand as an agency what it would take to get us to that point to where whether we're talking about East Texas and this particular aquifer, maybe it is so prolific it doesn't matter. I don't know, but no one can really tell us or show us. We can only go with the limited data that we have. That the same technology would be implemented in the Edwards Aquifer, which is a very different type of aquifer, and across the state is what I would envision. But I would really like to hear what the resource requirements would be, because I think that's something we need to look at if we're really serious as a committee and as a DIAS about making certain that we're not making these decisions based on a limited perspective.
I do agree that our data infrastructure with our groundwater data could use some improvements, and we have a couple projects in the works of the board to figure out what that might look like in the future. I think that'd be a first step to kind of even approaching the concept of what you're speaking about. But we'd be happy to kind of chat about that a bit more and kind of brainstorm on potential ideas.
I would love to hear that. In one of our hearings, we heard that some of the data that was being used was as old as 10 years old. Some of it might have even been older that was used in some of the modeling for a different bill, but that was laid out in front of us, or a different topic that was discussed. But anyway, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Members, any other questions? All right, thank you all for being here. Appreciate your testimony. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on, for, or against House Bill 27? If not, I close on the bill. Members, is there any objection to the adoption of the committee substitute for House Bill 27? The chair hears none, and the committee substitute is adopted. The chair moves that House Bill 27, as substituted, be reported favorably to the full House with the recommendation that it do pass and be printed and be sent to the Committee on Calendars. The clerk will call the roll.
Chair Harris.
Aye.
Vice Chair Martinez. Ashby. Barry. Bell. Buckley. Fairley. Gomez. Garcia. Gonzalez. Romero.
Aye.
Villalobos. Zwiener.
There being 11 ayes, 0 nays, 0 present not voting, the motion unanimously prevails.
Chair.
Chair recognizes Mr. Romero.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to say that I think that you're an amazing chairman, someone that's fully committed to the state of Texas and ensuring that we take the right path forward, that we don't create these deserts, that all folks around our state understand that when it comes to water, it's just like food. And we would never let our family go hungry. And while I did vote for the bill today, honestly, I initially had planned on voting no because of some of my concerns, and had it not been for the really gross social media post, I think I would have voted no. I just want to make clear that I am supporting your dedication to ensuring that we get more science. But I do continue to support a broader policy of moving water across our state. And as a member representing the DFW area, in some of the previous debates that we've had in Marvin Nichols Reservoir, I think that my position has been well established. And so in the future, I believe that we all should understand that both surface water and groundwater transfers are going to be necessary to sustain the growth that drives our great state.
Can't tell you how much I appreciate your comments and your support, Representative Romero, and everyone else on the committee on this bill. This whole issue is very complex. It impacts different areas differently than it does my home county, and readily recognize that. And you have my commitment that as we move forward into the interim and into next session, as we continue these discussions to figure out how to solve this very hard problem, that we're going to work together and take the input of every member on this committee and how the solutions impact your districts before we take any action in the future. And I think we've done that up to this point as well. Appreciate y'all's input up to this point, and look forward to continuing the discussion on the House floor very soon. The chair lays out House Bill 24. Representative Ashby offers a committee substitute. Members, this bill was really what I came up with. It's one of the 4 bills that I filed in the previous special session, refiled it this time. And it's very simple. It's a 1-page bill. All it does is it says that a groundwater conservation district may not approve a permit application for production and export, and taking into consideration all of the applications or wells that are being applied for by the applicant, if the total production would exceed 5% of the modeled available groundwater. So going back to the whole reason for this, going back to the hearing, and Representative Ashby has a similar bill that he's filed, and I think is why we ended up at the bill that we did in House Bill 27 is because we need data. We need to understand the data before we start exporting mass quantities of water, no matter if it's my county or Representative Ashby's county or Representative Berry's or anyone's here. We need to understand the data and how much water is there. And so the current project, even in the witness's own testimony during that hearing on July 15th, was that they were proposing taking possibly around 50,000 acre-feet of water per year. The modeled available groundwater, according to the Texas Water Development Board, for the 2 counties where this pumping would happen inside the GCD, was 36,000 acre-feet of water. So well over the modeled available groundwater exporting out. And so my point in this bill and hearing it today is to give us a position to continue the discussion. And so with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and we can move on to testimony. Representative Villalobos.
Hi there. I spoke to you previously, but I just wanted on the record. I represent the city of Corpus Christi. I did not know they were going to write a letter. That's pretty cool. They did. But we're looking
Except
at.
they would think they were against it, weren't they?
They described our position very well. We are a regional water provider, though we reside basically just in Nueces County. We provide water to 7 different counties in our surrounding area. We're looking at every single water project available to us at the moment and trying to find the cheapest cost per gallon and drought-resistant project, from desal to groundwater to brackish, everything and all in between. There is one project where that would have been highly affected by this bill, where they were looking to get water from the county north of us, but at the same time, we do provide water to that county, and so through future legislative sessions, I just want that to be taken into account, some type of credit to where if it's beneficial to the county you are transporting out of to help service their economic development, that should be taken into consideration. Right now, I believe, I don't have the acre feet in front of me, I was trying to find it before I spoke, but we provide a lot to Sanpat County, supplying water to their major industrial facilities on that side of the port, so just something to keep in
Yeah,
mind.
when we had the conversation earlier about it, it's something we need to talk about for sure. And I think as well, talking about ASR, that should fit in as well, as ASR develops and areas are able to store groundwater, some sort of a credit system against whatever may be exported. So there's a balance to be struck for sure.
Thank you.
Representative Gonzalez.
Thank you, Chairman. And these conversations take more than like one session or one meeting, one hearing, one bill. They're complex.
That's why we started early.
That's why I know. That's why I'm commending your leadership. But I also want to commend Representative Romero earlier, as he mentioned, like this is a complex issue for him in his region, and he's voted yes on that bill because of all the dynamics. But in order for us to truly address this very complex issue, like the cattle raiser said, this is like one of the most difficult issues. We're gonna have to respect each other's differences. I mean, Corpus is so different than El Paso, right? And El Paso is so different than East Texas, right? And it's gonna be a really different struggle to how we navigate it. But I do think, like, there's a lot of care on this dais, and I think we have navigated the conversations really well. I just want to say, like, I hope in the future as we continue to think about how can we protect your community and how can we protect my community, those two things can live in the same space.
That's right.
And I think that's really important as we move forward, and just want to always continue to share this space with like love and compassion.
Absolutely. Thank you, Representative Gonzalez. Members, any other questions? All right, let's move on to testimony. Chair calls Bob Harden, Perry Fowler, Sarah Kirkle. Chair calls Kevin Ward. He's still here, I believe he left. Kevin Ward. We will show Kevin Ward as registered for the bill, not testifying. Amber Stelly. All right, Mr. Harden, let's start with you again.
Yes, again, my name's Bob Harden. I'm a groundwater engineer in the state of Texas for many decades. I'm here today on behalf of Texas Association of Groundwater Owners and Producers. And the organization is neutral on House Bill 24. I would like to say that after hearing a lot of the discussions here today, that I would caution everyone on getting too prescriptive in solutions too quickly. And particularly referring to MAG. MAG really hasn't, well, most of the state of Texas, MAG really hasn't been flushed out to be the amount of water that's going to be produced into the future. So far, it's been a placeholder in the DFC process where a certain amount of water is just assumed to be produced so that we thus can calculate a DFC. It's a kind of a reverse engineering process. Secondly, to kind of give you a perspective on the importance of having long-term dynamic responses to challenges, we heard earlier about 50,000 acre feet a year being exported for 50 years. In Northeast Texas, that's less than 0.3% of the water that is sitting in the ground in Northeast Texas. So what I want to impress upon everyone is Texas is blessed with immense amounts of groundwater for future use. Think something on the order of 18 billion acre feet of water in the ground. We don't have a shortage of water per se. We may have a shortage of water in location, but we mostly have shortages of infrastructure and well-designed wells and well-designed regulatory structures to both conserve, that is true, Chairman, but also to be able to produce and serve the needs of Texas. So this is a balance, but I just would encourage everyone to not get too prescriptive. The future's somewhat unknown, and if we can just have a structure where the system can operate, think, and morph and adapt as time goes on, that'll serve us the best. Thank you.
Out of the billions, how many did you say? 13 billion in storage? 18
That's just, yes.
in the ground?
Yeah.
Do we know how much of that is recoverable?
Well, not all of it's recoverable. You know, it just depends on the formation.
Right.
But a significant amount is recoverable because even if it's 10%, that's 1.8 billion. And
Yeah, I think that's the whole point of this whole discussion is we need to know not only how much is there, but how much is recoverable. Go ahead.
yeah, I would just say there's a famous water paper that was put out in 1984 by John Bredehoff, and it's called The Water Budget Myth. And it describes how if, instead of Nevada he was referencing, but water planners believe that if they can just quantify the recharge rate, then they're finished. And he goes on to state how C.V. Tice, in a paper written in 1939, The Source of Water Derived from Wells, where Tice explains that even if you pump the recharge rate, you have to first deplete storage in the outcrop to cause the recharge to move towards the wells in a sustainable fashion. So you're going to still face the same impacts, challenges that we have to work through. And so it's, this is just, don't try to get too prescriptive with it is all I'm going to say.
Okay, thank you. Representative Romero.
I just have one question, Mr. Chairman. So how did you come up with the 0.3%? How did you determine that that's what it was? Are you saying?
50,000 times 50 years.
But is that based upon, that's what's?
Divided by the total storage and from the Texas Water Development Board for GMA 11.
Okay, that's for the whole region, right?
For GMA 11,
Okay.
yes.
Sorry.
Any other questions for this witness? All right, Ms. Stelly?
Amber Stelly, General Manager for the Consolidated Water Supply Corporation, and I'm testifying for. I have very little new to add. I would just say earlier in reference to the rule of capture comments, I'm not suggesting we remove or overturn it altogether. The reason why I would say we're testifying for this bill is because it represents a nudge in the right direction during this interim time. And I think obviously what we really have statewide is the need to modernize rule of capture. And my point, bringing that up, retired Judge Hetch's comments, excuse me, is that was 1999. What on earth has changed in such a short time? And I think it's clear what has changed is that water has become expensive and it has become scarce. Although we have a lot below us, I agree that we think we have a lot below us. Water has become very expensive, and the Vista Ridge project was at the time, and it may still be, the largest P3 public-private partnership in the nation. So the largest in the nation was a water project, and I think that was a tipping scale. Water has become, we can now monetize it. It has become valuable enough for for-profits to do these, and so it's just a different landscape. And that is it. That's really the only thing I wanted to point out on that.
Thank you. Members,
Thank you.
any questions for Ms. Deli? Representative Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you mentioned the rule of capture, and I, in kind of a metaphoric comment, mentioned that it feels a little bit like, the rule of capture feels a little bit like somebody crawling under your fence to steal your calves. And if we don't address the rule of capture to preserve the water that's under in some form or fashion, then we're going to continue, whether it's the water that's in storage. The water in storage also is the private property right of that property owner that it sets under, or whether it's in pressure, wherever it falls within that conversation. To deplete that without any consideration of those private property rights, I think is one of the things we've got to come up with an answer to. Because long-term, what we're going to see is big business come in with deep pockets, put in significant pumping capability, and take the water out from under you. Once it's gone, it's gone. You know, I mentioned the 100-foot. I ranch across the Trinity River in Freestone County, where Anderson and Freestone and Leon come together. And if you drop 100 foot, my well won't have enough submergence to work in it. None of them. I've got a fair number of wells on the place. But, and it's not just about me, but every single neighbor is setting those same zones that they draw from. And so it's just it is a major concern anytime that I hear, you know, the rule of capture applied in the manner that we've always used it. But anyway,
Yes,
thank
sir.
you.
I agree. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Members, any other questions for Ms. Deli? All right, thank you so much for coming all this way, Amber. Ms. Kirkle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. My name is Sarah Kirkle, and I'm with the Texas Water Association, which is a statewide policy association focused on water supply and management. We're here on HB 24. Chairman Harris, we want to express our support and appreciation for you in supporting these really important groundwater conversations. As you know, within the membership of TWA, we have an incredibly wide, diverse set of members. We have all types of water districts that are related to water, from cities to river authorities to regional districts to flood, irrigation, navigation districts, groundwater conservation districts. We have all of the engineering, legal, and consulting firms that support their work. We have statewide associations, nonprofits, environmental groups. We have water users. We have industry. We have all of the different stakeholders. So as a result of that, when it comes to groundwater-related debates, our members have every different perspective on these issues. TWA's mission is to promote sound water policy for Texas. And one of the ways that we do this is during the interim, we pull together all of our members and they vote to support which biggest issues and challenges in state law we should tackle. We form subcommittees during the interim and work through and try to find solutions to these issues to bring forward to the legislature. Our consensus threshold is 90%, which is very high. However, we have been able to successfully bring forward a dozen or more proposals over the last decade to address, especially in the groundwater space, things like brackish groundwater, GCD rules, and other proposals. And while we can't always reach consensus, the discussions in our process enable us to bring to you various different perspectives that you're likely to hear, and they also result in better and more informed policy proposals once we get to the legislative process. Specific to groundwater export and large production permits, they are very complex policy proposals. Our goal is to ensure that when we get to the place of seeing these proposals in bills, that we're able to consider the full scope of those potential consequences. We recognize the importance of this conversation and are committed to working on this issue during the interim to better inform this policy debate ahead of the next regular session. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions? All right, thank you. Mr. Perry? Mr. Fowler?
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Chairman Harris, Vice Chairman Martinez, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Perry Fowler. I'm the Executive Director of the Texas Water Infrastructure Network, which is a nonprofit that represents companies that build water infrastructure across the state of Texas. I'm here today to register our position on House Bill 24 to share our concerns regarding its potential impacts on responsible water management and executing water supply infrastructure projects across the state. TexWin understands and appreciates the intent of House Bill 24 to protect local groundwater resources and to ensure long-term sustainability of aquifers within groundwater conservation districts. We also recognize concerns highlighted in recent developments related to proposed large-scale groundwater transfers, such as the project in your districts. We're also aware of valid concerns that these projects raise within local communities across the state of Texas. That being said, we also believe that a balanced approach is essential to address evolving water challenges facing Texas. While HB 24 aims to limit out-of-district transfers to 5% of modeled available groundwater, we are concerned that this restriction may have unintended consequences, some of which we have outlined in our written testimony submitted before the committee that I won't bore you with here today. I guess as a takeaway here, we urge the committee to consider the potential ramifications and explore alternative approaches in the interim to accomplish a balance of local needs and regional water security. We'd also like to request and support legislation similar to House Bill 1400, which we supported in this committee, and we're hopeful that this committee will contemplate new legislation in the interim that examines current law and increases funding to all groundwater conservation districts so they can properly operate regardless of the projects inside the districts with good data. We believe that further study and stakeholder input are needed to develop comprehensive groundwater management strategies and promote conservation, encourage responsible transfers, and ensure the long-term sustainability of our water resources for all Texans. TexWin, we may just build these things, but we care. We have to have the water to build it, and this has to be a part of the strategies that we're looking at. And we feel very sure that under your leadership, we'll get to a good place on this. So thank you very much and appreciate you.
Thank you. Members, any questions for Mr. Fowler? Are you reaching for your mic, Representative Romero? No. All right. Thank you guys very much for being here to testify.
Thank you.
Chair calls Billy Howe, Dan Gaddis, Natalie Blue, and Adam Foster. And Ms. Blue, just for clarification, you are here as a resource witness, I'm assuming.
That is correct, thank
Okay.
you.
All right, Mr. Foster, let's go ahead and start with you.
Okay. Chairman Harris, Vice Chair Martinez, my name is Adam Foster. I'm the Executive Director of the Texas Alliance Groundwater Districts. I represent 90 of the groundwater conservation districts in Texas out of the 98. I'm here today to be on the bill. We very much appreciate you bringing this topic to light. We think that it's something that needs to be looked at. However, we've been a little preoccupied this week, and we were not able to meet to form a position on the bill. So
Sorry I wasn't able to come speak.
it's completely understandable. So, but again, we appreciate everything y'all are doing, you and the rest of the committee on this important issue, and we look forward to working with you in the interim over this very important topic.
Thank you. Ms. Blue, real quick, will you just state your name, who you represent, and your position on the bill?
Natalie Blue, Texas Water Development Board, resource witness on the bill.
Thank you. Mr. Gaddis?
I'd like to hear from Mr. Howell first, if you don't mind, Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman.
absolutely. Mr. Howe?
I told him he needed to go first, and I was going to say what that guy said. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Billy Howe, Associate Director, Government Affairs, Texas Farm Bureau, testifying in support of House Bill 24. Our county leaders have been discussing big groundwater projects and how they may impact rural Texas for the past 20 years. The fact that these projects were going to happen in the Carrizo-Wilcox Aquifer has not been a secret. We've known since at least 2001 that this area was going to be targeted for big groundwater projects. Groundwater leases were already being signed and public meetings were already being held back then. It's the reason why the people that reside over the aquifer asked the legislature to create districts from all the way east of San Antonio all the way up to Tyler. And it's the reason our county leaders adopted policy many years ago that supports limiting groundwater exports that impact the private property rights of local landowners. However, this is where we're going to go off the tracks. However, as you heard in the previous hearing, there are groundwater districts that have chosen not to use the extensive regulatory authority provided by, and most importantly, they have not adopted rules that afford every landowner their right to a fair share of a common aquifer recognized by the Texas Supreme Court in EAA versus Day. It is the refusal of these districts to recognize and protect this correlative private property right that allows water marketers to apply for massive amounts of modeled available groundwater that does not correlate to the amount of groundwater under the land in which they have a property interest. When T. Boone Pickens planned to export groundwater out of the Panhandle, because the Panhandle Groundwater Conservation District had rules that protected landowners, T. Boone had to acquire over 200,000 acres of groundwater rights. Of course, someone will come behind me and tell you rules like that don't work in urban areas because it's too hard to acquire groundwater rights from so many landowners. But I'll point out that there are over 7,000 oil and gas wells that were drilled in Tarrant County during the development of the Barnett Shale. And in fact, 3,400 wells are still active, according to Google. And the Railroad Commission didn't tell those operators not to worry about leasing mineral rights from all those urban landowners. They had to lease mineral rights just like the operators drilling wells in rural Hill County, where I'm from. Because the Railroad Commission recognizes that they have to make sure everyone gets their fair share. There are no exceptions to constitutional rights based on where you live. Property rights are property rights. This is why HB 24 is so important. It is clear the legislature must take steps to protect landowners' rights to the water under their land because some local districts will not do it. There are other districts doing a great job of it. HB 24 would help ensure that groundwater conservation districts can't permit an amount of water that is far beyond what a water marketer's fair share should be. It would help ensure water is reserved for other landowners so that they have an opportunity to produce or save their fair share. Texas Farm Bureau supports HB 24 because it protects landowner rights, and we ask for your favorable consideration, and maybe the governor will put it on the call.
Thank you. Members, any questions for Billy?
You want to ask me your real capture question? I really wished you would.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Bell.
I did have a question. What's your take on the rule of capture?
It does not prevent the regulation of oil and gas, and it does not prevent the regulation of groundwater. And the courts have said that over and over again. In fact, I'll read you this little quote from one of the precedent-setting cases in 1961, where an oil and gas operator wanted to drill an oil and gas well on basically a home-sized lot. And it clearly was going to drain all the oil and gas from adjacent tracts. And they said that they had a right to do that because of the rule of capture. And the Railroad Commission obviously disagreed and was not going to allow them to do that. And the court told the oil and gas operator to infer that the rule of capture gives the landowner the legally protected right to capture the oil and gas underlying his neighbor's tract is entirely inconsistent with the ownership theory. It is to be reemphasized that their permits were granted for the purpose of avoiding confiscation of the minerals underlying their properties, not for the purpose of enabling them to drain minerals underlying adjoining lands to pay the cost of their operations plus profits. And as we know, the Supreme Court in Day recognized that the ownership of oil and gas, the common law with regards to that applies to groundwater as well. So the rule of capture is not the problem here. The problem here is the groundwater districts not using the authority you all gave them to not only conserve water, but because property rights are constitutional rights, the other purpose of groundwater districts is to protect private property rights because they don't have any option other than to do that, or their regulations are not constitutional. So that's the position of the Farm Bureau on this issue.
Well, that's a good position. I do now have another question for you.
Yes, sir.
So since those are the rights of the people who are in a groundwater conservation district, where does that leave all those folks that are not in a conservation district who have the same right to ownership?
They got a right to
but
come
not
to you and
the
ask to be in a
defense,
groundwater district.
But not the defense,
I mean,
limited though it be of the groundwater conservation district.
Yes, sir. That's why we saw the number of groundwater districts double after 2001. They doubled because people realized they needed groundwater districts to protect themselves. And unfortunately, some of the districts they created to protect them aren't doing their job. But that's your option in the state of Texas. You can either protect yourself by drilling your own well and using self-help, or you need to get in a groundwater district.
So if I wanted to, let's just say, this will really mess him up. So I've decided tomorrow that I'm gonna put in, my 2,300 acres, I'm gonna put in, I don't know, 9 high-capacity wells. And, I'm now chasing somebody else's permit, and they've used all of the available water. Now, because I am in a groundwater conservation district, I can't use my own ability to permit and drill my own wells to just keep him from stealing the water out from underneath me or crawling under my fence and stealing my calves because my wire's 12 inches high.
If you find yourself in that situation, then your groundwater district didn't have rules to make sure that everybody got their fair share.
How do
Because
they
you
monitor
shouldn't
it?
be, you shouldn't be in a situation where they permitted all the water to just a few people and there's none left for you.
Well, that's kind of what we've all been talking about with this vast amount of water they want to use, but somebody has to be monitoring the amount of water that's being taken. So, is the suggestion, on shallow wells with a deep drawdown like is being discussed by what these high-capacity wells could do, does everybody need to put monitoring wells on the edge of their property to figure out if there's, I'm really not trying to have I really am. I appreciate you bringing it up because I find it very difficult to look very deep in the ground unless I'm over by the river when it's down, then I can see pretty far down. But
Well, again, if you're in a groundwater district, Representative Bell, which you are, you've got a single county district, and single county district that actually has the ability to do the job the legislature
well, at the
gave
ranch,
it.
and my ranch is in Freestone County.
Yeah.
My house is in Montgomery County.
Right.
So.
But again, it's the groundwater district's job to monitor that groundwater. They're the ones that are restricting your rights to drill your well and to produce the groundwater. It's their job to monitor that and know what impacts people are feeling from their regulations, basically, I guess, so to speak.
And
It's
back
not
to
individual landowners' job to do that.
Well, it may not be our job, but, if they're stealing your calves out from under your fence because the wire's too high, it seems to me that it's a similar scenario. It's still a value that's leaving your property, and if you're not seeing it at the time, you don't know it's gone until it's gone. Had a
But
tractor like
again,
that not many months
It's the
ago.
groundwater district's job to make sure they aren't stealing your calves. That's the point. It's just like if they're stealing your calves, you can call the sheriff and you can get them arrested, you can get them stopped.
If you can catch 'em.
Well, the groundwater district's supposed to be your sheriff.
Or the TSCRA.
Or the
Oh, yeah.
TSCRA,
Now
who
get the
I
Rangers
understand
on.
do an awesome job of that.
And so
Yes.
I follow that conversation. I do think it's more challenging when you really look at the amount of water that's being taken out of these conversations in this particular application, because you don't really have the ability to just put in your own big wells and start pumping, because you've already taken the surplus in the conversation out of the room.
Well, and the other interesting part about that rule capture and everything, and I had this conversation with Chairman Harris in his office back a few weeks ago, there's actually cases where the Supreme Court said that the rule of capture actually helps the ability to be able to regulate, because you don't have landowners suing each other. The last time they did that was in the 2008 Garza case, and it just so happens that the justice that made that statement in that opinion was Nathan Hecht. In that opinion, he clearly said the rule of capture has actually enabled the Railroad Commission through its rules to be able to regulate oil and gas and protect people's property rights. So, just interesting discussion to have.
Oh, yes.
About all this, yeah.
And, because and very concerning, when somebody mentioned being an 8th generation, my kids, 8th generation on my side, 9th generation on their mama's side.
Yes, sir.
So they've been around here a few days. you know, and it is very concerning because water's the thing we cannot live without. And people hear me say it over and over and over, and maybe they get tired of hearing it, but, you know, we can live without oil, we can live without electricity, we did before. We can live without a lot of things, but water you don't live without. And so it's, if it sounds like a touchy subject, to me, it's real touchy. And I know of a couple of pieces of property where water rights have been severed already, where it's beautiful grass as long as it rains, but nobody will buy it because they have no ability to water their livestock. And there's, I mean, but anyway, that's
Yes, sir.
I will not belabor it any longer, but ye old English law may or may not have met its day. But thank you. Yeah.
Mr.
Enjoyed the
Gaddis.
conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. Again, my name is Dan Gaddis. I'm here on behalf of Texas Southwest Cattle Raisers. I currently serve as second vice president of the organization, and that's why I asked Billy to go first. And because I think the conversation, and I kind of knew what he was going to say, I knew the conversation was going to raise some serious issues and make the committee understand that these are not easy issues to deal with, and there are competing interests. I want to say that the TSRA does not currently have an official position on the bills, but we're looking at our current policies to help with the committee and go through. But these are important issues, and they're hard issues, as we've already discussed. Those are the competing interests that we've got in front of us, and that I want the committee to always be thoughtful of. We've got landowners that are members that want to lease their right of their water rights to somebody to market and go somewhere else. We have landowners that want and need to utilize that water that's underneath them for their own purpose or uses, or they don't want to contract it for the future because they want to have opportunities in the future. And so those are competing interests. But I think the interest, I will go back to say, is testimony I gave on the other bill is we have to always, this bill is trying to address an issue that I think is not currently addressed in the current legislation, in the current statutes, in the current laws, and that is truly the ability to discriminate based upon the water's use. We can't do that today. We can set permits and we can set fees and we can do all those types of things. But if we never have our ability in our local area to get our water back in at the point in time that we need it, it does two things. It causes that local area, if they're doing the job they're supposed to be doing, to set rules and regulations that really restrict how much water can be going because they know they can't ever get it back, thereby not giving the state of Texas some access to resources that would help the state of Texas in the future in other areas. They do that, or they do nothing, as Billy was talking about earlier, and then all the water leaves and you've created an economic desert for future generations forever. That is why this is a hard issue. We don't have a current position on the current bill, but I think that the thought behind the current bill of trying to create a mechanism by which we can balance out-of-district and in-district needs is something that the state needs to address. And I'm not so sure, Billy may disagree with me, I'm not sure that the current laws allow a water district to truly do that under the scenario.
Thank you. Members, any questions? All right, thank you guys very much. Appreciate your testimony. Members, we do have resource witnesses from TCEQ. Would anyone like to hear from those resource witnesses? Does anyone else wish to testify on for or against House Bill 24? If not, I close on the bill. If there's no objection, the committee substitute is withdrawn and the bill will be left pending. Is there objection? The chair hears none and the bill is left pending. Members, I want to thank you for your support today, for your diligence and willingness to dive in and do the hard work that we have set before us. Especially want to thank Representative Alders, who is not on the committee, for being here to learn and get educated on the topic. But especially Senator Nichols, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being my counterpart on these bills in the Senate and for your dedication to our shared communities and to East Texas. And I know that you will do the hard work that will be required over in the Senate to get this across the goal line as well. And I look forward to working with you and deeply grateful for your friendship and your leadership on this. Thank you. Members, that concludes today's agenda. Is there any further business for the committee to address? If not, Representative Gonzalez moves to adjourn. Is there objection? Hearing none, the committee stands adjourned, subject to the call of the chair.